I think, a really great thought statement on when to know like it's time for boundaries. And that is when you're allowing other people's behaviors, thoughts, or feelings to affect you so much that it's now taking you out of God's truth and his thoughts and feelings and behaviors for you.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Because then again, you're giving up your God-given autonomy.
Right. Hi, I'm Caroline Howard, a biblical counselor and certified life breakthrough coach.
And I'm Chris Oneth, marriage and family therapist and executive director of Downey Park Counseling Associates.
Welcome to our next question, where we attempt to answer the questions of life through conversations in psychology and Christianity.
Remember, this is a place of discovery and definitely not the final answer. 21. Episode 21.
Our podcast is now legal.
Legal?
21. It's 21.
Oh, wow. What?
We can now drink and vote on the podcast.
So interesting thing there, because this episode is about boundaries. What are boundaries?
What are boundaries? That's
okay.
What yeah.
So that.
Are you going to lay down some boundaries on me right now?
You can't say that. No, that's not the way it works. No, but when I think about that, like in the United States, the age 21 is some magical quote unquote promised land where we can then start abusing alcohol.
Yeah.
In Europe, it's not the case. In Europe, I mean, they'll like...
Your kids drink it. Yeah.
I mean, you got the Italians pouring the vino for the Nino. Wait, is that Italian?
Nino is Spanish.
No, I don't think so. Well, in España. If I
love our mixing of cultures here.
I have to.
Thank you for not saying all of that with your German accent.
Don't even get me started. Because I speak German.
Duh.
Because if I can fake the accent, then I obviously speak the language.
So I usually, because I'm half German, and like my son knows this, so we talk about.
You keep telling him every day.
I do.
That you know that
so
I'm
I
half
always
German.
say no to him in German. 9.
9.
Yeah, I always say 9. And so he'll be like, Mom, can I have a donut? And I'll be like, 9. And he'll be like, I can have 9 of them? And I'll be like, and I'll say, da, because you just said I can have none of them. And he's like, I hate that you figured that out, Mom.
Golly, this poor kid. You intellectually browbeat him. You fell into my trap once again.
He's thinking that I'm falling into his trap. And what he doesn't realize is...
You're having two different conversations.
I am smarter than a 7th grader.
That's funny because when I was a teacher, and I've discussed this with other teachers, namely Paul Brudishauser. But anyway, so yes. So we had talked about how some of our students were smarter than us. And so he would say, yeah, you're like sitting there going, I know more than you, but you're smarter than me, which like that's why with my own children, I've tried to like put the thumb of knowledge over them their entire upbringing, because once they figured out they're smarter than me, then I'm in bad shape. Yeah. Anyway, that was a joke.
It sounds like really healthy parenting right there.
So
we will not be doing an episode on what is good parenting.
So, but the whole alcohol thing where it's like, it's like at 21, then you go out to a party and you completely abuse it and you don't have a good relationship with it, where potentially if you start having having a relationship with it at a young age, right? Then doesn't have this mystique and this whole like propensity for abuse. Yeah. Potentially. It's not to say there's not alcoholics in Italy and parts of Europe.
Right.
Teaches you how to set good boundaries with it, though, right? Versus
that it's not
boundary.
Such a big deal. It's not this thing. Because even in the vilifying it, we idolize it.
Right.
So boundaries with creation, i.e., alk.
Are you sure?
Alka-Seltzer?
Jeez. Alka-Seltzer. I don't know what happened there. It didn't sound the way in my head.
You should keep talking.
Okay. So.
Have you been drinking? Alk. Have you been drinking?
I've been on the alk. It is approximately 2 p.m.
It's Friday. It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Did you start the clock on this episode?
I did. I am doing it right now because as soon as you looked at that, I was like,
Alk was an alien.
That's
Alf was
Alf.
an alien?
okay.
Alf.
You don't even know. You weren't around in the 80s.
Did you watch Alf? Who watched Alf?
No,
He's all trying to get 80s on us over here.
you caught me.
Alf
Junior.
I watched Alf. Did you watch Alf?
I don't think I could have, I got comfortable with the Muppet and the thing. I don't know. It was
Okay,
weird.
so you have
Not
issues
really.
there. Okay, so there's our question. What was your favorite show as a child?
Oh, boy. Caleb?
I know.
I
I was a child
stumped
most
you.
recently.
Yes. He was born at 35.
Recently.
The McLaughlin group was Caleb's favorite.
Chris, do you think I'm 35?
No, I said you were born at 35. In other words, you were born like the moment
you
you
were
came out of your
35?
mama. You were,
Oh.
you had a pad and a pen, and
I see, I see.
you were already.
You were born intellectual.
You had a job. You had. You were balancing
I'm
a
an
bank
old
account.
soul, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Sure, if that's the way
You're a
want to put it.
wise man.
Yes, there you go.
Oh man, this is such a hard question. I feel like Scooby Doo was a big one.
Like the originals with Casey Kasem.
I don't know. I probably
Wait,
there
Casey
were
Kasem
reruns.
was in Scooby Doo.
He was Scooby Doo.
I know. I discovered that recently.
Know that.
Here's a tune that came way out
Oh
in
my gosh.
1953.
Heck yes, I used to always listen to Casey Kasem.
Yeah.
I did not know he was Scooby Dooby Doo.
Yeah.
Rhyme and roll. Yes. So Scooby Doo, yay.
I feel like
Okay.
Arthur was another one. Childhood
Oh
television.
yeah,
The Aardvark. Yeah.
Arthur. Okay.
Wait, he wore the red shirt.
Yeah. We wore a yellow shirt. Excuse
Oh,
me.
yeah. I'm sorry.
Oh wait, he was an aardvark.
Yeah.
I didn't know he was an
Many
aardvark.
people don't know that. Yeah.
Look at all
Doesn't
that
really
we're
look like an
learning.
aardvark. You
Who's
kinda-
the kid? Who's the one with the football head?
The
from
football.
like you thinking? What's it called?
Wait, was he bald?
You're thinking a different show.
Yes, a cartoon. My
Hey,
kids
Hey
grew up-
Arnold is what
Hey
you're talking
Arnold.
About. Yep,
Yes.
Yep.
Thank
I don't know
you.
that one.
Because my kids watch the Hey Arnold and the
Yeah.
Rugrats, and
I
of course
definitely watched that,
SpongeBob.
yeah.
We still watch. SpongeBob.
We don't talk about SpongeBob.
Uh oh.
We
Sorry.
don't talk about SpongeBob.
Sorry.
Okay, here's what's funny is we were very I don't even know what the word. We were mean parents, and we would not let our daughters watch SpongeBob because it was bad.
Really?
Right.
That was definitely that was the
Yeah.
thing.
And then my husband is
The
in,
swearing episode was
I'd-
spot on.
my husband is in food sales. He sells food to restaurants. And he found out that there was a restaurant on SpongeBob, and then he's like, "Oh, well, it's not bad. Let's watch it."
Oh wow. What was bad about it? I'm just curious.
I don't. You know what? It was the religion I was affiliated with at the time, which
Okay.
was technically a cult.
Oh,
And
Nice.
they
But I feel like there's a lot of like
Whoopsie.
just
very much.
the crazy off the walls activity.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. I think they were worried kids would become crazy or uncontrollable.
And yet we let our children watch Winnie the Pooh,
right.
who spells every word backwards or
Right.
wrong,
That's fine.
and that was okay.
Well, there's even
So their character mattered, but
Because
not
then
their
you
education.
still know more than your child, so it's fine.
Oh yeah,
There you
absolutely. Because I said so.
Okay, what was your favorite show?
I'm stuck on why SpongeBob. I mean, I would love to hear the kind
I
of
honestly don't
explanations.
know. I honestly, it was just because
That's
of
the way we did it.
the quote unquote cult, and it was like,
Oh,
that's so
okay.
bad. Don't let your kids watch it. And it
Okay,
was-
so lots of rules.
I
and
would
the-
have been fine with it. Because
Oh.
we know me. I'm a
very
wonderful
undiscerning
person.
No.
rule breaker. You tell me no, and I'll be like, why not? And I'll do it.
So when I was a kid, I had a morning ritual where I would come downstairs and watch the Saturday morning cartoons. I am
love the
definitely
Saturday
a
morning
child
cartoons.
of the 70s and 80s in that respect.
Ditto.
So I would come down and I had my pillow, and I would lay on my stomach with my pillow and watch Super Friends. That was big. And then
And
I
your
had
cereal? Did you have your cereal?
I don't remember having cereal. I don't know that I was allowed to bring the cereal into the living room. That's just off the top of my head. That would be one reason why I wouldn't do it. Or, I was too into the program. I mean,
Gotcha.
and then, so I had the Super Friends, and then I got a Super Friends lunchbox, which were the metal lunch boxes,
Yes.
right? And then I went to elementary school, and then on the cover of the Super Friends lunchbox, you see lunchbox. You see Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman are in the front of this Super Friends pack. And so one time a kid said to me, "How come you have a Wonder Woman lunchbox?"
Oh.
And I was like, "Oh no." Oh, and immediately, and this goes to back to our last episode, feelings. I was like, "Oh no!" And now the lunchbox that I thought perfectly was okay. One kid said Wonder Woman lunchbox, and all of a sudden it was like,
And
Oh
you
no,
don't use
I
it
can't have
anymore.
this.
Oh,
I know.
That's so sad.
Which, I look back on it and I should have said, heck yeah, Wonder Woman.
Right? I know where it's at.
That's right. Hey, I'm okay. Or being okay with, yeah, okay, fine, Wonder Woman.
Okay.
So that has me then think about my youngest son, who one time he rode with his brothers from our house in a neighborhood we call Loma in Modesto, all the way to like Claus Road via the bike trail. He did not have a bike, or at least a bike that was working at the time or something like that. It had a flat tire or whatever. So he ended up taking my wife's bike, a total woman bike. And there was no mistaking, quote unquote, woman bike. Okay. He had no problem with it. It had a basket on it and everything else. And he was like, yeah, I don't care.
Good
and
for
here
him.
he is, this like in junior high.
Good for him.
I know. Well, not to say that, he needs to start wearing dresses or anything else like that. But, and it's not a dress, it's a kilt. But, but yeah, that's the part of like, even as a kid, I was like, man, I would have liked to have been okay with myself to say, well, okay, you can think it's a Wonder Woman lunchbox, or to have the boundaries within myself. But again, I was a kid to say you can think it's a Wonder Woman lunchbox, and even if you do, I don't have a problem with Wonder Woman. She's cool.
I feel like this is a whole counseling session.
Golly, we've
along
slipped
with
into
the water one from last episode.
The water. Once again, Chris's childhood comes up.
My favorite was Punky Brewster.
Oh my gosh,
I loved Punky Brewster.
Why? What do you remember about Punky
Probably
Brewster?
because she was like wild and didn't follow the rules and like wore whatever she wanted to wear, and I totally identified.
Yeah.
Was like,
what was the storyline with Punky Brewster?
She was an orphan.
Okay.
And that old man guy, I can't remember his name.
Daddy Warbucks?
It wasn't Daddy Warbucks. But I do love Annie. Was one of my favorite movies, and Pippi Longstocking, and all three of them are these
redheads.
No, Pippi and Annie are. Punky Brewster had dark hair.
Okay.
But they all three were orphans that were like just wild and crazy and got to do their own thing.
That's like a archetype, like the orphan, the wild orphan.
Yeah, maybe that's what I want.
Which maybe it harkens to not being part of this established kind of rules thing.
And, are you psychoanalyzing me right now?
No, I'm just throwing it out there, and But even
I'll take
even
it to
rules.
My next therapy session.
What's that?
I'll take it to my therapist in my next session.
That's a good idea. So even rules are a type of boundary.
They are. But
Go ahead.
Well.
Yes. Confess. Confess that I am right.
I think it depends on how you're looking at boundaries.
Okay.
So let's define boundary. Let's start. We're
probably a good idea.
Diving in, and we're not talking about Punky Brewster and all my psychological issues anymore. Boundaries are, according to good old Merriam-Webster, they are something that indicates or fixes a limit or extent. So their examples are those two trees mark the boundary of our property.
Okay.
So tell me how that boundary is a rule.
So
right, you were wrong. I mean, that's all I have to say.
What's that? No. So again, there is a more than likely some sort of governing body that has come up with that boundary, and it can be agreed upon, it can be disputed, but there is a standard by which that exists. Like the two trees or the mountain range is a boundary to our country, right?
Right.
The two trees only symbolize this imaginary demarcation between your property and my property, but that's a rule.
So that's how I would say a boundary is. It is that line between health and unhealth.
Okay. Sure. And that gets back to, unhealthy behavior or healthy behavior becoming an unhealthy behavior. And there is a threshold at which that is a boundary that is crossed.
Right.
That we degenerate into unhealthsville.
Unhealthsville. So which way do I want to go first?
Well, can I say this?
Yes.
So part of the boundaries we're talking about, of course, are psychological boundaries.
Yes. Which, do you want to know the definition of a psychological boundary?
By all means.
A conceptual limit between you and the other person.
All right. Excellent. So that gets into our three relationships. in that there is a boundaries we need to have with ourselves.
Yes.
There are boundaries we need to have with other people, and there are boundaries we need to have within the environment.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
I don't go crossing into my neighbor's environment. So that is both a relational and an external boundary.
Yeah. So like if I go to Jack in the Box, I'm not going to jump the counter and go on the other side and get
That's
my food.
not your place.
That's not my environment over there.
You stay in your lane.
Exactly. I order
a lane.
and pay.
A lane is a boundary.
Yes.
Which is weird because, and by the way, boundaries are very powerful.
Yes.
And if you think about it, like driving on the highway, I drove on the highway to get here, right? Driving on the highway, the fact that we're hurtling along at 55 miles an hour.
Wow, Grandpa.
And the only thing that's separating us and other hunks of metal hurtling along at 55 miles an hour is this line, right?
Yeah.
And then when someone breaks that,
crazy?
or someone weaves in and out of
Yeah.
traffic, we get annoyed at them
Yeah.
and are like,
Because
how
they've crossed a
dare
boundary.
they? They've broken the boundary.
They created unhealth where you were healthy.
Yes.
By getting
Well,
in your
yeah,
lane.
and you can say safe too, right?
Stay in your lane, people.
Stay in your lane. Yes. Yeah. And so that is very much a psychological component in how we exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then how do boundaries exist in the Bible? Like, where does that talk about? Does it say boundaries?
No.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't have those words.
Well, it doesn't. Then that's not true.
That's so wrong.
Okay. Doesn't say Trinity either.
What?
Oh my gosh. But it's a thing.
But boundaries are biblical.
Totally, I
Adam,
think,
Adam,
yeah.
You know, God laid down boundaries for Adam and Eve. Do
Don't eat
not
that.
eat of that tree, or else this will happen.
Yes.
And what did they do? They broke the boundary.
That's so like all of us. That's so mankind.
Right? But I mean, like, people want to say they're not biblical, and like literally the first book of the Bible has boundaries.
Sure. You can have all of this awesome stuff,
Yeah.
and here's the one thing
Yeah.
that I need you to stay away from.
Yeah.
And wouldn't you know it?
Right. I mean, would
Yeah.
you could, and this might be a stretch, and I'm sorry if you're a really theological person and I'm making you cringe, but I think of God telling Noah to build the ark.
Okay.
Build the ark and you'll be saved from the flood.
Okay. Sure.
And he could have easily said, well, I'm not going to build the ark. And then he would have drowned. But he,
Well, he also gave dimensions for the ark.
well, you're right. That would be part of the boundary.
Boom.
If you don't build it right, your boat's going to fall apart.
You don't say.
Okay.
Sure.
I see what you're saying. I didn't realize, I get it. But yeah, so and Jesus, when he needed solitude in the Bible, he would tell, I'll say it nicer than I said it earlier. He would tell his followers, his disciples.
What did you say earlier? His little followers.
His little followers.
His little cronies. No, I don't. And I said, you mean disciples? That's what I said to you.
I just said he would tell his little followers, hey, back up. I need some space.
Yeah.
I got to go pray.
Sure.
He told the man who was delivered from the legions of demons, and he was like, I'm going with you. And he was like, no, you're not, because I got to go do this. And
Yes.
you got to go over here and do that.
Yeah, so there was clear demonstration of where the moment at which there was a separation between Christ and those around him. In other words, this is where I stop and you start.
Yeah.
Right? And it even has me think of Christ telling the fishermen to throw their net on the other side of the boat. It was like, here, do this different thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But the main crux there is you have to do it.
Right.
Like you I suppose you could choose not to do it,
Right.
but it's not going to work, or it's not going to go well with you. So here is a parameter I can give you. You've got to follow through.
Right. Like God could have easily, he could have easily put an electric fence around the tree in the Garden of Eden.
There you go.
He could have done.
Now you really
He
can't
could have
get there.
monitored it 24/7
Right.
to keep them away. But yet it was like, no, here's the healthy thing. Just
Yeah.
stay away from it.
Yeah.
And if you want to choose unhealth, then you're going to cross that boundary. And
Sure.
price.
So then I guess that brings us to the place where we talk about boundaries with ourselves and boundaries with others.
Okay.
Like, how does that play out?
Okay, so this is my, and again, we could differ. This is my, when I talk, because we talk about boundaries obviously a lot in counseling,
We
and
do.
I've had to do boundaries as well. And I say verbiage matters. So I always say we lay down boundaries, we don't put up boundaries.
Okay.
Because when we put up something, it's a wall
Okay.
that is
Yes.
dividing us from someone and saying, like in a healthy relationship, you don't want a wall.
Right.
So it's more like a picket. I've heard some people describe it like it's a picket fence that has a gate you could get through.
Okay.
I always think of it as a path you lay down
Okay.
to say, here I am here. I'm on this side of this path in my
Okay.
health, in my doing my thing.
Yes.
And you're over here in your unhealth and doing your thing. If like I'm using this as in an unhealthy situation, I guess you would say, in a
Okay.
relationship. And I say, here's the boundary. If you want to be in health, you will respect this boundary, and then you can be in this
The picket
relationship
fence?
with me. Or the picket fence or the path.
I got confused there.
It could be both. I've heard some people describe it as a picket fence because
Okay.
you can see over it. You can still, you can walk up to
okay.
it and have conversation
So I
with
think,
the person.
if I'm understanding you correctly, that because people get into the area of, for example, they'll say, my boundary is if you say something that I don't like, I cut you off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a wall.
Yeah. And that's a wall.
Because then.
But there are times where you do need walls. Where you might need to cut someone off because of the unhealth.
Well, and I think an example would be that I can think of is if in every conversation, if the other party gets escalated,
Yeah.
right away starts raising their voice, getting loud, a healthy boundary is to be able to say, okay, let's stop this discussion.
Yeah.
And every time you start to get out of control, this has to stop for our benefit, your
Right.
benefit and my benefit.
Right. I will no longer
Now
tolerate
that can
you
upset people.
doing that.
Putting up a boundary like that can upset people because then you're not jumping into the game that has always been there.
Well, here's the interesting thing because that other person is going to think, well, now you're just trying to control me. No,
of course
I'm not
they would,
trying
which
to
is
control
ironic
you.
because even their loudness
Right,
can be
and
a
it's
type of control.
you actually. I'm actually putting the control in the ball in your court. With
Absolutely,
control.
yes.
Saying if you want to talk to me, you have the choice to talk to me,
Yes.
but you can choose to continue to be loud and not talk to me,
Right.
Or you can choose to calm down and then you can talk to me.
And by loud, I'm not saying 1 decibel raise in
Right,
your
right.
voice or a look of agitation, because once we start putting boundaries on that, then we're never going to have a conversation.
Yeah.
But there is an example of 2 boundaries at play.
Mm-hmm.
The boundary one has with themselves. So, for example, if Caroline starts to say stuff and I get agitated,
That would never happen.
so I need to have a boundary with myself and say, wait a second, why is this bothering me? Because the boundary I might need to have with myself is that I challenge some of what I think she's saying to me. If my
Okay.
belief is you're saying I'm stupid and she never said those words,
Right.
right? Then I need to start to challenge that. Well, okay, maybe she's not saying that. And maybe I need to challenge that and really get into why are these feelings like this coming up before I put a boundary on her and say, you can't say that.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah. Now, on the other hand, if her approach to me is, you're the biggest bald idiot that I've ever seen in my life, and this, that, and the other, she goes off, well, I can put a boundary saying, hey, Caroline, I would love to have a discussion with you, but I can't when the approach is like that. So let's regroup, and next time let's have a conversation where we're not demeaning each other or whatever.
And you learn your big girl words.
Big girl.
Where I'm not demeaning, I would use more intellectual words.
Oh, I get it. You're learning
yeah,
the big girl
I'm
words.
learning
Okay.
the big girl words. No,
it.
you don't have to learn the big girl words.
like,
You're
wow.
good.
Chris
what
was
happened?
ready to leave that conversation.
I almost got really agitated.
He's like, I'm putting down a boundary now. We will no longer do this podcast
Right.
if you're going to tell me to use big girl words.
Okay, so when it comes to the various types of boundaries, usually in session I use these circles, right?
Okay.
And so, and this is believe it or not, this can be applied to a boundary with ourselves, boundary with other people, boundary with the environment.
Okay.
So I can even have this, I'll give this graphic to Caleb, and he'll decide to post it or not or whatever on the YouTube. So the first example are two circles that are separate from each other. The circles representing people. And an independent boundary is one in which, if we're talking about in this context, independent boundary is one where I don't know how to connect to my own thoughts and feelings, and neither do you. So we do not connect to each other in a truly meaningful way. And that can happen in friendships, in marriage relationships, in family relationships, right? And so what we're left doing is we only talk about surface things.
Okay.
How about them Niners?
Gosh, I love those kind of relationships.
Wait.
That was sarcasm.
I was like, but really, how about them Niners? No. So yeah, we
Chiefs.
only talk about things that are removed from us, right? And because I don't know, if you start getting emotional, I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, ugh, and it scares the crud out of me, so we just stay away from that. Okay. Or we may sort of connect. And this is not a bad type of connection, because oftentimes relationships start like this. Is we connect on the Niners and how well they're doing. And it's like, yeah.
We would never connect on the Niners.
What is wrong with you in the...
I'm a Chiefs fan.
What? Giants and... Never mind, we're not going there. So I'm going to practice the boundary and not get weird about that. No, I do not own a stitch of Niner clothing, so I shouldn't talk.
Okay. Well, I own a Chiefs sweatshirt, so I'm
better you are
fan than you.
You are way...
I am.
Okay. So, so independent is separate. Yes. Right. And couples run into frustration with this because they don't connect. And this usually takes two parties. I had a couple come to me, and they were both in intellectual professions, like more the math type of professions. Okay. Right. And so I kind of started going over these boundaries. I started talking about emotions and stuff like that. And they were like, do we have to talk about all this emotional stuff?
Wow. And
I'm like, well, if you want to really connect, because part of the deal, as I remember it, was like our spark is not there. We're not, and I don't know that they use the word connect to talk about their relationship, because they just knew something was not there or something was gone,
and they mathematically couldn't figure it out.
They mathematically couldn't mental it through.
Okay.
Right, and so they weren't allowing themselves to be emotional with themselves. And so they were putting an independent boundary up with themselves, with their emotions, and so therefore weren't able to connect with each other. And then when I proposed, hey, start feeling things, they were like, whoa, this guy. And then I never saw him again. So that is independent. Okay. So then there's two types of dependent boundaries. There is something that I refer to as a balanced dependent, in which and there's another word for this, is enmeshed. And this is where the two circles representing people are almost completely overlapping each other.
Okay.
And what that represents is, if it's this case, right, is where I don't know where I stop and you start.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to connect to my thoughts and feelings, and neither do you. Mm-hmm. So we put each other's thoughts and feelings on the other. Yeah. In other words, look how you made me feel.
Oh, don't you love that?
I love that. If you make me feel a certain way, then I've given up my boundary, and I've also given up my autonomy. Mm-hmm. I've given up my whatever power I think I can have within myself, right?
Do you feel like, I feel like this is a natural occurrence that children do?
Yes.
Like it's right. We're like naturally, not saying it's right, but
no, it's a level of maturity.
It's what you first hear from your kids. Well, you made me feel mad because you wouldn't let me have candy.
You know, that's a very good point, because as you know, from day one, a child is born, we start the training of independence, or at least we should. And so
I don't want my kids independent.
I know, that's the toxic femininity.
That's the mom thing.
So, but at one point, you guys, I mean, the baby is inside the mom. Yeah. I don't know if you realize this, but right.
Wait, are we having a whole bird? Do we need to put a disclaimer on this podcast?
So in a way, the baby picks up on mom's emotions and what she puts into her body and all this other stuff. Well, then baby miraculously comes outside of mom, right? Through a process that I'm confused still about. But and then mom is taking care of baby, and baby's not saying, hey, you know what, mom? I would like my milk a little warmer. So maybe you can. No, mom is constantly like watching. Mom's a behaviorist, and a behaviorist, and animals are behaviorists too. In other words, they look at the behavior to try and judge what is going on with that little person. And so, oh my gosh, baby's crying. Okay, so I check baby's diaper. Okay, that's cool. I've fed baby. Okay, that's cool. Baby's still crying. I try to rock baby to sleep. I do all these things to try and like circumvent what is going on with baby because baby can't articulate themselves. Now, over time, we develop language, we develop all those things, and correspondingly, and my daughter, I gotta say, my daughter does a great job of this, where she has taught her boys to express their emotions.
Yes, it's amazing.
Yes. Now, even with that, and we talked about emotions last podcast, you know, the boundary is such that she's now helping those boys develop a healthy boundary with their emotions. In other words, just because you feel scared doesn't mean you quit.
Right. That's so awesome.
Isn't amazing? She's amazing.
Yeah.
So all that to say is, you're right as far as a child being like, well, you made me feel this way because at some point
there's still a mesh there.
Yeah, that mom was working, doing all the things to help kid in their state of whatever they were in. But over time, that kid needs to start to learn what it means to take responsibility for their feelings and develop a boundary within themselves so that the boundary with mom then, because look, you have kids that are 40, 50 years old who still haven't figured, well, and again, it's a product of the family upbringing and everything else, because in a lot of those cases, mom doesn't want to have her kids separate from who she is. And so you have this enmeshed or balanced, dependent boundary. Yeah. Or in the other case, imbalanced dependent. Okay. And this is where you still have two circles overlapping each other, but one circle is a lot smaller than the other. And what this represents is, if I'm the big circle and you're the small circle, I think you are responsible for not only your own feelings, you're responsible for my thoughts and feelings as well. So I put the burden all on you. Yeah. And I am worried about losing power. I am worried about, I can get grandiose. I can get overpowering, and because I'm not recognizing a healthy boundary. And the crazy thing about this is, in this small circle scenario, big circle scenario, right? You agree. You hate it, but you agree.
Right.
So you, as a small circle, try to take on my thoughts and feelings.
It's so unhealthy.
And take responsibility. Well, I mean, we all go through growth stages, right? Yeah. So all the while hoping someday I will act as you act. In other words, hoping someday I will say, let me take that on. Let me help you. Yeah. And then over time, a lot of times you grow hurt and resentful. Yeah. Then a number of things could happen there because the boundaries are poor. If someday, and I've seen this many times in couples relationships, this is usually the point they come to therapy, where after 20 years, and I hate to say this, but oftentimes the big circle, more often than not, the big circle is the dude. Yep. And wife is small circle. And after 20 years, she has had enough. Yeah. And she says, I'm done, because she's gone numb. Then he gets scared. He becomes a small circle. Then she becomes the big circle.
Isn't that crazy?
Crazy. So
crazy.
So healthy is actually where, and there's a bunch of other examples in this here thing I'm looking at, but healthy looks like a Venn diagram.
Looks like a what?
Venn diagram.
Okay.
Caleb knows exactly what that. I can see the look in his eyes.
Circles again.
Caleb is brilliant.
It's two circles that overlap each other a little bit.
I'm like,
see here?
I'm going to say my parents are math teachers. They are not the math people who came into Chris's office.
Oh my gosh. So in this, I got the word interdependent from author who has since passed, Pia Melody. Interdependent is where I know where I stop and I know where you start.
Yeah.
I am connected to my thoughts and feelings.
Yep.
You are connected to your thoughts and feelings. And so therefore, when you have heavy feelings, I'm okay with that.
So would you say that little overlap? I can't do that with my hands, but you all get it.
It's like
that little
like
overlapping part right there.
You're going to have a lot of excess.
Is that
but
where
it's like,
empathy lives?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, empathy is a product of a healthy boundary with oneself.
Yeah.
Because you allow yourself to feel certain things. And so then you can totally understand when another person feels something.
Yeah. So
instead of making it about you.
Right. And you get it that like the sad feeling I'm feeling is because you're sad, but it's not my. I don't know. That wasn't going to make sense.
Wait. What? Huh? Wait. The sad feeling I'm feeling.
It made sense in my head before I started to say it.
So when in some relationships, some marriages, there's a lot of potential like hurt and jealousy over past relationships.
Okay.
Right? Because there's a fear, and we'll probably talk about jealousy in one of these podcasts in the distant future.
Right
but
on
anyway,
our list.
Jealousy is a fear that I'm going to lose or I don't have, and if I don't have something and I have the potential to even lose what I don't really have. Anyway, all that to say is, my wife's ex-boyfriend actually ended up committing suicide. And it was while we were married, and I think we were newly married, maybe 5-10 years into the marriage, whatever. She was crushed. Mm-hmm. And I even talk about it today, I still hurt for her, even then, right? I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt she loved me. I was okay with her hurt feelings. That's not to say I was totally healthy back then,
right?
Where I'm totally healthy today. I let her be her. And so as she mourned the loss of, and she hadn't like spoke to him in forever.
Yeah.
But yes, she had a caring relationship with this dude. And he was, by all accounts, I never met the guy, but he seemed like a great guy.
Yeah.
And he loved Jesus, and he just went through some really tough stuff. So he ended up taking this, and again, as my wife hurt, I hurt. That's the empathy right there. Mm-hmm. Knowing what it is for me to lose someone, and then understanding the grief as best I can that she's going through.
Yeah.
And allowing her to feel that instead of saying like, oh my gosh, do you still love him? Do you still have feelings? Of course she has feelings for him. That goes without question.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that our relationship was at all compromised.
Right. Or that it lessened her feelings for you.
Yes.
Okay.
Briefly go back to the big small circle dynamic.
Okay.
In the big small circle dynamic, when for example, when the big circles had a rough day and they come in the house and you could just read it on them, they have had a rough day.
Yeah.
The first response the small circle has is, oh no, what did I do? Oh no, did I do something? Mm-hmm. Do I have to fix something? Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. Let's switch it. Like, let's say the small circle comes in after a rough day. Well, the big circle sees that and says, what the hell do you want me to do?
Right.
But in both situations, they make it about them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they don't know how to be okay with the other person's feelings and thoughts. Correspondingly, in an interdependent, healthy relationship, when one of those circles sees the other having a hard time, the question isn't, oh no, what should I do? Or what do you want me to do? The question is, hey, are you doing okay? What's going on? You want to talk about it? Mm-hmm. And that's super important, right? So going back to the boundary we have with ourselves, being able to say, it's okay that I feel difficult things sometimes.
Yep.
I need to interact with my thoughts, interact with my feelings. Then when someone else has thoughts and feelings, I don't run for the hills or try to shut it down. There you go.
Boom, the circles.
Huh?
I said, boom, the circles.
Oh, the circles, man. The circles are real. Yeah. Now,
so hearing those boundaries, because boundaries, I think, are, these are just natural boundaries that you should have
right.
in your everyday life.
Sure.
In every relationship.
Yes.
That's how they should be. So now let's skip to, I think, more of what I was talking about when we started with paths and fences is the boundaries of that you have to lay down in a negative relationship.
Okay.
Maybe in a relationship where they're the big circle and you're the little circle and you're trying to balance that out. So what do I do if that big circle is like,
So that's a great question, because what happens is there's a couple things the small circle needs to do.
Yeah.
They need to grow bigger.
Okay.
And they need to start to separate from the big circle. For a lot of people who are the small circle, the codependent, that scares the crap out of them.
It does. Laying down, and I get this often. And I mean, I remember when I had to do boundaries for the first time like that in a relationship. It is scary because I was codependent.
Yeah.
I mean, we all have codependent tendencies.
Sure.
So, but it's very scary. But then once you do it,
oh, sure.
It's so
let me ask you
freeing.
this. Why is it scary?
Why is it scary?
I don't ask that question like, come on, why is it scary?
No, I know. And I'm trying to think back in those times because now it's not scary because I see the benefits. Well, I mean, if you're looking at it in that big circle, little circle, it's scary because what if I make them feel a negative emotion?
Ooh.
And that's going to be terrible. And then I have to figure out how to fix that and hold to this boundary. And how do I do that?
Oh, so what can happen there, and we'll address all that, but what can happen there is the small circle can oftentimes feel so uncomfortable with drawing boundaries that they explode into a big circle. And then their boundaries become like, you shut up. Don't do that.
Controlling. They become this control thing, which is not a good boundary.
Which gets to the all or nothing black and white.
Yeah.
Bowling gutters.
Yeah.
Because the most difficult thing is to be in the middle saying, you know what, I'm sorry, I can't do that.
Right.
Without an explosion.
Right.
One of the things that I've experienced with a lot of my clients who are the small circle is they are so used to their whole definition of themselves and their life being the person who is the big circle.
Yeah.
So in other words, they wouldn't know what to do with their life if they didn't have the big circle to worry about or dote over or whatever.
Yeah, because then you got to go figure out who you are.
And this happens with spouses. This happens with children. I've heard about it with grown children, even, not grown out of the house children. But mom, right, even at the thought of her kids growing up and leaving is like, what am I going to do with myself? Mm-hmm. And so part of the fear is, what if I make a mistake? Or what if I don't know if I have hobbies. I don't know if I have things that I do that I like. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes they don't because they have practiced a very poor boundary in completely obliterating themselves for the sake of family.
Yeah.
Right. And that gets to it's a healthy behavior to take care of your family.
Yeah.
It's
but
unhealthy.
They've become the small circle and the kid. And the
That's why I say
it's
it's voluntary too. Right. And they get
Yeah.
resentful because they can have the idea that someone made them do that.
But they chose.
Yeah. I mean, and listen, it's not like I choose this and then it's like over time, the decision is reinforced. Well, in the same way, over time, the decision to start to practice independence can be reinforced. I think the best way to draw a boundary is to truly know yourself, right? Otherwise, the boundary will come across like you can't do this, you can't do that. Whereas a healthy boundary might be like, hey, if you do that, like, there's nothing I can do to stop you necessarily, but I'm not going to be able to do this anymore. One example is this, like the whole dinner thing. Like, this gets back to stories where husband comes home at all hours, right?
Yeah.
Husband comes home sometimes 5 o'clock, sometimes 8 o'clock, sometimes 9 o'clock in the evening.
Okay.
And he wants a hot meal.
Does he know how to use the microwave?
Yeah. And wife, right, being a small circle, doesn't want to upset him. Maybe she doesn't like confrontation based on maybe an upbringing she had, all that stuff. So she is very careful to, prepare him dinner when he gets home, and she's completely obliterated herself.
Yeah.
She may even okay, kids, you're on your own because dad now is home and I got to cook it,
Right.
A boundary for her might be saying, sure, I'll cook you dinner. Dinner's at 5.
Mm-hmm. And if you want it warm, here's how you use the microwave.
Right? Yeah, dinner's at 5.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, an unhealthy boundary may be like, screw it, I'm never cooking dinner for you again.
Right.
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 Now, maybe that's down the road. Maybe down the road, that would be a healthy boundary. Look, I'm not going to cook dinner for you anymore.
Right. Because
Right.
he's never coming home at 5 and she's...
Or he's throwing it on the floor or something. I don't know, whatever.
That's true.
Okay, that's fine. You don't like it. And not like be mad about it or upset about it or definitely. And by the way, people can definitely influence our thoughts and feelings, but they shouldn't be given total control of them.
Right. Well, because here's I think a really great thought statement on when to know it's time for boundaries. And that is when you're allowing other people's behaviors, thoughts, or feelings to affect you so much that it's now taking you out of God's truth and his thoughts and feelings and behaviors for you.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Because then again, you're giving up your God-given autonomy.
Right.
I have this handout that I give clients that talk about boundary language. So anytime we say, look how you made me feel, we're saying you have made me feel bad, and now you have to make me feel good. And when that doesn't happen, because it doesn't, then in this argument we're having, if you can't make me feel better, then I want you to feel as crappy as I do. And that's when the kitchen sink arguing takes place. Mm-hmm. So being careful about that mental boundary with ourselves to be able to say, look, what they did upset me, but I cannot let it torpedo my boat.
Yeah.
Don't let it torpedo your boat.
Don't let it torpedo your boat.
Whatever floats your boat.
But don't let it torpedo your boat.
Don't let it torpedo. So, So even in boundaries, I think there's allowances that we can be mindful of. I call them 4 allowances.
Okay.
So
you're almost running out of time, so you better do it fast.
Oh my gosh, I better speak fast. First allowance: you are allowed to have your thoughts and feelings.
I am.
Exactly. No one can tell you can't think that or feel that. Even if others don't agree with you, you're allowed to have your thoughts and feelings. Congratulations, right? Even if you don't have all the facts, okay. We might get to those eventually, right? Yeah. We've talked about feelings and how they don't necessarily rule the day.
Right.
Number 2, you are allowed to let others have their thoughts and feelings. Weird.
Now you're just getting all crazy.
Well, because we're totally okay with, this is how I think and this is how I feel. But then when it comes to an other, then we want to put some sort of wall or something. No, that's entirely not fair. So they get to have their thoughts and feelings, even if they don't agree with ours, even if they don't have all the facts. So we don't need to minimize them or take control of them or anything else.
Right.
And so we need to listen and say, okay, help me understand that. Right. Number 3, you are allowed to be affected, but not controlled by others' behaviors and actions. So that bothers me that you do that. But I am not, oh my gosh, some of the language people use, you're crushing me, you're killing me with what you're doing. And it's that is an attempt to get someone to do something else by manipulation.
I was going to say, we call that manipulation.
You don't say. Yes. Caring about others is not taking on their issues or feelings. So, for example, if the wife doesn't give a time frame to her husband to come home because she doesn't want him to feel bad, part of the boundary she needs to have with herself is, look, if he feels bad, that's kind of his responsibility. If he gets mad or whatever, that's his responsibility, because she's opened the door and said, look, I totally want to cook dinner for you. Here's how it works.
Yeah. I think I say that to my 12-year-old often. Well, you're choosing to feel that way about this.
Grr. Don't you use your psychobabble on me. Caring for others is not hijacking their feelings.
Right.
Right. Or being hijacked by their feelings or whatever. Caring for someone is allowing them to be them. Wow. Okay, number 4, finally, you and others are allowed to try and either fail or succeed.
Yeah.
So you're allowed to be imperfect.
I love that.
So
I
yeah,
think
moving
we should
forward.
give each other more permission to be imperfect.
Exactly. And when that's funny when we say imperfect, do we mean not like us?
Yeah, pretty much. Just kidding.
That is truly like allowing another to have a different attitude.
It's the whole not wrong, just different.
Yes.
Just because
Instead of like, I
yeah.
can't handle that, so I've got to make that go away.
Yeah.
Right? Moving forward can mean making mistakes, right? It's not failure, it's discovery.
Right.
So we must give grace to ourselves and to others,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Now, boy, that's a huge episode in and of itself. In order to really give others grace, we need to have grace wash over us and
Right.
completely envelop us.
Right.
And we can encourage and support in their different thoughts, feelings, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There you have it.
That's good.
That's all I have to say about that.
I mean, we could sit here for a whole nother hour and do
totally.
boundaries, but we won't because we're out of time.
Okay.
And maybe down the road we'll do a part 2 of boundaries.
That'd be cool.
So if you have questions, comments, because there's
So much.
so much. And again, there's so much on all of this. We are, like we've always said, we're attempting to answer a question, think it through. We're not always going to have the full answer.
Absolutely.
But that is what boundaries are.
Okay. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks for joining us today as we continue our journey talking about life's many questions.
To stay connected with us, you can follow us at Downey Park Counseling on both Facebook and Instagram. You can also follow Caroline on Instagram at Relatable Caroline. And make sure you tune in next week for our next question.